So at the base, well, first of all, anything that we did at the base, most of those things were based off of L. Ron Hubbard advices. So after he went into, I guess you could just say, hiding or seclusion once he came back from the ocean and he went hunt the land, he lived in different places all over the United States, and he actually even lived in Hemet for a while. He lived in an apartment or some sort of house in Hemet. And whatever he wrote, because he wasn't supposed to be managing or profiting from Scientology, and that's the reason they lost their tax exemption from the IRS early on, is because they saw like, hey, there's this one dude, Hubbard, and he's basically making a ton of money. So you ain't tax exempt because he's getting all the cash. So because he wasn't supposed to be managing Scientology, he wasn't supposed to be profiting from Scientology, he couldn't write any policy letters because otherwise he'd be running Scientology. So they had this, they were basically where he was still running it and he was still telling everybody what to do. But anytime he wrote anything, it was called an advice.
Right.
So it wasn't policy. It wasn't policy. It was just advice. But the advices were treated even higher than policy. So his advice was in stone at the property. So anything that he wrote, that's basically how the property operated. And one of the things that he wrote was this thing called team share. And he said for Golden Era Productions, he said they should have these cards. And the cards were share in the team. And so we call it team share cards. And you had a card, and depending on if your statistics were up or your statistics were down, you would either gain a card or lose a card, respectively. So if you produced 20 widgets this week and you produced 22 widgets next week, then you'd get a card back. And if you produced 18 widgets this week, you'd lose a card. And the cards were, you had a social card. So that was the fifth card you could have. And that was like, you could go on Liberty. You could go to, if there was a Christmas party, you could go to a Christmas party. It was basically allowed you to do social things.
Okay.
So if you didn't have a social card, you couldn't have Liberties.
Right.
If you didn't have a social card, you couldn't go to the Christmas party. If there was, it's funny because, well, I'll keep going. So then the next card you had was a bonus card. If you didn't have a bonus card and there was bonuses, then you couldn't get bonuses. So if there was a Christmas bonus, but you didn't have a bonus card, you wouldn't get the $35 Christmas bonus that year, which was the bonus the last year I was there in 2004.
$35?
$35 was the Christmas bonus.
Fuck me, man. I never had a Christmas bonus that low.
It's not even $1 a week for the whole year. $35.
Wow.
You could make more than that sitting on the side of the highway with a piece of cardboard.
Yeah.
Okay. The next card was I want to say the Chow card. No, the pay card.
Okay. The
next card, the third card was the pay card. So if you didn't have a pay card, you wouldn't get paid. That's a simple card. The next card was the Chow card. So that was the second card you were issued, was the Chow card. So if you didn't have a Chow card, no food. You'd have to eat beans and rice leftovers, or I think in the advice, he basically just says you just got to figure out how to get some food. But you can't sit in the dining room and eat food. You can eat out by the dumpsters, whatever leftovers you can scrap up. That's where you get to eat. That's the Chow card. And then the very last or first card you'd get was a birthing card. No birthing card, you can't sleep in your bed. You got to sleep. And it says this in the advice. If you don't have a birthing card, then you might have to go sleep out on the golf course. And the property, there was a golf course right next to the property, and literally staff would go sleep on the golf course if they didn't have a birthing card. Okay, now here's so the cards, you'd lose the cards starting at the bonus or social, bonus, pay, Chow, birthing.
Yep.
Okay. So first of all, there was never any fucking parties and there was never any bonuses. So those first 2 cards were like buffer cards. And it got to be like you could basically mouth off to your senior and be like, hey, why don't you go screw yourself? And the senior could say, you lose a card.
Okay.
Right then.
Okay.
That's how the system worked. It was supposed to be administered by the MAAs, the Master at Arms, or the ethics division or department. But it really got to a point where it's just like, hey, you suck. Give me 2 cards. Or, it was just like COB would come into an area and somebody would do something and he'd take all 5 cards in one sentence. You lost all your cards. You lose all your team share cards. Or you lose 2 cards. Or he'd issue something down to the base and say, everyone loses 2 cards. In the whole golden era, everyone in gold loses 2 cards for this flap that happened.
Jesus.
So if you were on your pay card, you now had no pay and no food. You were just down to a birthing card. And if you were one of these poor saps who just couldn't do anything right to get your stats up, and every week your stats went down, in 2 months you have no cards. You're done. And he also talks about if you went too long with no cards, then basically you just get offloaded. Like, you're no use to us. Get the fuck out of here.
Okay.
So I would say for the first 10 years I was at Gold, the team share system was alive and well. And you lived or died by those cards.
Yeah.
To a point where sometimes you'd have to present the card to eat. Like, you'd have to have the cards on you, which is another giant pain in the ass, because when you're in the Sea Org, you don't really have any possessions. So keeping track of these stupid little credit cards, and they were like a credit card. They had your name stamped into them like an actual credit card. They were the size of a credit card. I wish I still had them, but they said Team Share and Golden Era Productions, and then it said pay. Team Share and Golden Era Productions, social. And it had your name stamped into it. And I think it was, it just had your name stamped into it, just like on a regular credit card. And you had to carry these things with you. So if there was a Christmas party, you'd show up and they'd be like, hey, where's your social card? And you'd be like, are you fucking kidding me? I don't know where those goddamn cards are. And some people would be like, I haven't had a social card in like 4 years. I don't know where the fuck that thing is. And so there was always this taking and getting back of cards. So if you got a card taken, you'd have to get it back. And if your senior took it and he lost it, then it was gone. If the MAA took it, he'd have to remember when to give it back to you. And it was all this paperwork, and whether your stats were up, whether they were down, or they'd say, oh, your stats are down, give me a card. You'd be like, I don't have my card. I don't know where my cards are. So then you'd still have 5 cards, even though you really had no cards, just because you never had your cards when they needed to be taken away.
Right.
So it was basically 100% arbitrary. There was no, even though L. Ron Hubbard said this is how it should be, it was perverted and distorted, and it was abused. And that's the other thing that would come up, is that every few years it'd be like, there was a big investigation done into Golden Era, and it appears that the team share system is being abused. And then it would be like, only an MA can take a card, only an MA can give back a card. It's purely based on stats. You can't just say you lose a card. And then, of course, like 2 weeks later, COB, Dave Miscavige, would say, you lose a card. Everybody would be like, what the fuck? I thought we weren't going to do that anymore.
Right.
But no one sent him the investigation.
Right.
It was only in Gold where we got let in on that. This has to be per L. Ron Hubbard. So eventually, I'd say by the late 1990s, it was basically like, and we had been, so many people had no pay cards or no birthing card for years. So it's basically like, so you're really not gonna let me eat anymore. Like, come on, this is getting silly. Like, I don't give a shit about your team share system. Your team share system can go suck it. I don't care. I don't have those shares, but I'm fucking gonna get some food.
Right.
So it basically just got to the point where they couldn't even enforce it because it was total anarchy at the base. And it was also, it was basically admitted and widely known that it was thoroughly abused. So everybody was like, I'm not going to do it anymore. I don't give a shit. You can say whatever you want to say. And we weren't getting bonuses. We weren't getting, and we weren't getting paid for a lot of times. And we weren't getting bonuses or any parties or anything. So it was really the birthing card and the pay card, but you can't have a system where only 2 cards are worth anything.
Right.
When the other cards are just totally useless. So the whole thing basically was a total wipeout, which is another great testament to how brilliant L. Ron Hubbard was, because it was a giant piece of shit.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the entire time that I was in the Sea Org, not once did any word of any of this card sharing system, team share system ever come down to PAC. No one ever talked about it.
Well, at the base, any issue that is issued at the base says confidential, base only, treason assignment. So we weren't even allowed to bring issues to our birthing. Like every once in a while, we had this thing called the OODs, the orders of the day, which is another thing that they used to do at the sea. They would issue this daily piece of paper that said all the stuff that was going on, what the schedule is, who's a scumbag today, who's not a scumbag today. It had all this listed out. I'm not joking.
No, I saw that. I know. We had that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, in the OODs, if you brought the OODs to your birthing, you get assigned treason.
Jesus.
Just for having a copy of the OODs at your, and it said eyes only, base confidential, so you wouldn't dare say something about the base. Like even when I was running the shoot crew where we shot all the films and we shot lots of videos for the events, we were down in LA. We stayed at the complex. We ate in the dining room. We were down there doing stuff. There was no chit chat. You don't chit chat with the locals down in PAC. Somebody starts getting chatty with you, you'd be like, dude, get the fuck out of here. Come on, man. I'm from Gold. I don't mess with no riffraff. Get the shit out of here.
There was definitely an attitude. I'll say that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. We were, but for our protection.
Right.
It was a defense mechanism. Right. If you were in LA and I was chatting it up with you and you were in PAC and David Miscavige walked by, that's it. I'm toast.
Yep.
And he'd literally be like, the fuck are you doing talking to these PAC guys? Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Like, you're from Gold. You're from Int. Come on. And there's a definite us versus them that's ingrained into you at the base. And even at the base, if you were in Gold was the shit of the property. There was another 10 organizations on the base. You had Exec Strata, CMO Gold, CMO Int, WDC, RTC, the L. Ron Hubbard's compilations, Senior CS Int, LRH PPRO, the PR guys for the LRH, all these guys, Int Management PR. Gold was the bottom of the totem pole. So if you were in any one of those orgs and you screwed up, you got posted in Gold.
Right.
If you were in RTC and Dave got pissed at you and you got booted out of RTC, you'd go into the grounds department Gold or made a dishwasher in Gold, because there's no lower status-wise and there's no more humiliation than here's this guy. When an Int staff member got on the bus, we had to Gold. If you were Gold, you had to get up.
Oh.
Yeah, like
okay.
serious, like a serious class system. Like you are less than. Get the fuck up. I'm going to sit down. And even if you were like a shit person in Int, if you got on the bus, you're still better than the most hot shit dude in Gold. You're still better than him, and that guy's got to get up. You could be a swamper in Int, and you could be a commander in Gold. That commander had to get up and give his seat to the swamper from Int. That's how it was for years. And only until the 2000s did it totally reverse, where the Gold guys were basically told, you guys are the only ones doing anything. You're like actually making stuff. Like you're making videos, you're making CDs, you're making DVDs. These guys in Int, they don't do shit. They don't do expansion of Scientology. They don't manage people. They don't send dispatches. They don't do anything. They sit around all day and confess their crimes up in the hole or up in the trailers. They don't do anything. They're the shit. They're the scum of the earth. And so the Gold guys were walking around like, you'd see this guy that you had to get up on the bus. You'd be like, hey, motherfucker, go fucking clean my car. You know, like that was that kind of like, hey, you suck. And to the point where, like, when I first got to the base in 1990, I was like, if I saw Mark Yeager, who was the COCMO int, he'd be like, yes, sir, absolutely, sir, right away, sir. When I left in the 2000s, I was like, hey, Mark, did you approve my finance submission? What the hell, dude? Do you want me to tell COB that you're sitting on my submission? Come on, fucker, you got to approve this thing. Like, it was complete opposite in the end, because the int guys had been Dave had talked so much shit about them for so long and told us that they're just scum. And we would get dispatches that we'd be CC'd on, and it would be addressed to int base SPs.
Wow.
And that was Mark Yeager, Jenny Linson, Ray Midoff, Guillaume Lesev. These guys, their title was int base SPs, and they actually had suppressive person declares written on them that were posted on the notice boards.
No shit. They were actually posted. Yeah. It wasn't just a verbal
declared
thing.
SPs. Yeah, they were declared SPs. And then they had an issue on the CMO int notice board that said declared SP, and then they'd be at the event a week later talking about all the expansion in Scientology. They'd be at the Shrine Auditorium, and this year the stats are highest ever, even though total bullshit on the stats, total bullshit anything they're talking about. And when they get back to the base, they're digging ditches.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I wanted to make sure everybody knows.
Yeah.
That's the way everything in Scientology is. It's all movie magic. Nothing is what it seems. Nothing.
Right.
When you see something that Scientology is showing you, that's not what's really happening behind the scenes. If they show Mark Yeager up on the podium talking about expansion, in real life, he's in the aeration ponds at the property digging out dried excrement by hand with no mask, with no hazmat suit. He's digging in shit and making shit dust and breathing shit. That's what he was doing a week before he was on stage at the Shrine in a tuxedo, being the Mark Yeager International Management. So it's all movie magic, man. There ain't no reality involved in any of that stuff.
And you got to comment on the fact that what does this do to these people? What does this do to a person to be the shit one day and the scumbag the next? But this is going on and on and on. And we were talking about long term.
2 decades.
Yeah.
2 decades of this nonsense going on. And that's what I think somebody asked me. I can't remember where it was. Somebody asked me, well, why do you leave? Or I really think there's 2 parts of it. I think it's the smart ones leave. I mean, the smarter you are, the more people, you have more chances of leaving, the smarter you are. But you also have to be willing to throw everything away, your whole life. You have to be willing to say, that's it. I'm going to start over. If I have to be a bum on the street, that's what I'm going to do. I'd rather be a bum on the street than live here. And it got to the point where I would rather be dead than be there. It was so miserable. And you could never win. You could never win. The rules would be established by Dave, and then you'd play by those rules, and then he'd change the rules. And he's always moving the goalpost. And he's always, you're just like, fuck this. And then when you kind of get the idea that there's no use anyway, like there's no expansion happening. The stats have been going down. All of Scientology stats are posted at the int base. All of them internationally. Long term. We're talking decades of stats. In 1996, all of the stats internationally crash, and they never recover, ever. From 1996, I left in 2005, those graphs were going all down since 1996. 1996 is when David Miscavige came out with the golden age of tech.
Exactly.
And Scientologists worldwide said, I'm out. I'm tapping out. This is a bunch of nonsense. I already did all this. Now you want me to do it again? I don't think so. I'm done.